I hope that we have a number of applicants for this. I hope people are looking at this potentially as a way to get their toe in the water without having to commit to a full 2 years and maybe see if they like it or not. So, great. Thank you very much. Okay, let's do, I want to do city manager reports. I want to talk for a minute before we go into that about, and Mark's gone now, but, and then perhaps Karen, you can talk about your experience last Friday. So last Thursday, Mark Morgan and I went to Concord for a meeting of the Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. Am I close?
That's correct.
Affectionately known as JLCAR. And this is a joint Senate House committee that reviews rules that are proposed by the various state agencies. And this was a regular JLCAR meeting. We were specifically there to provide testimony on the proposed PFAS rules. We were to, on the schedule, we were to be heard at 10:30. I'm going to go into a little detail here because it was kind of a strange occurrence. We were on the schedule to be heard at 10:30. In advance of us were a couple of proposed rules from the Education Department. There was a lot of people there. The corridor was full. There were communities, there were lobbyists, there were other interested parties, most of whom were there to submit testimony on the proposed PFAS rules. The testimony, and a lot of testimony was accepted on the 2 education rules, caused this to go until noon instead of 10:30. So noon rolled around. A lot of us had filled out these pink cards that you fill out if you want to make public comment. And there was a stack of pink cards there. And so we all filed into the hearing room at noon, an hour and a half beyond when this was supposed to be heard, and we'd all been there for 2 to 2.5 hours waiting. We all sat down, and probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the seats were taken. And the group of legislators immediately took up the first of the 3 amendments, had a little internal discussion, which you could not hear because they don't have a sound amplification system in the room, and the fan was on, so you couldn't basically hear much at all unless you were in the first couple of rows. And within about 10 minutes, they passed the first one. They quickly moved to the second and third ones with minimal conversation. They took absolutely no public comment. They did not say why they weren't taking any public comment. They simply didn't take any. And at 12:20, we were adjourned and all 3 proposed rules had passed. Boom, done. Wow. So there was sort of a lot of discussion among the folks in the audience. Folks said that many said they had been to a number of these hearings and had never seen this happen before, where there was literally no explanation of why they weren't going to take public comment, and then no public comment was taken. So this had clearly, in my mind anyway, been orchestrated prior to us even getting into the hearing. All 3 rules passed without amendment, and so I should note that they largely applied to drinking water systems and to sites which are subject to ambient groundwater quality standards, so like oil contaminated sites where you have a standard. So they added PFAS to those standards, so those folks have to sample for PFAS now as well, and it put into place this 11 parts per trillion standard for public drinking water supplies. They were not unanimous votes. I believe it was 6-4, 7-3, 7-3. So there were several legislators there that registered their objections. Those objections were based primarily on the very, very limited study that was done to assess the potential financial impact on communities of this. I've not read it. I heard about it from the folks there. And actually DES admitted that it was a very, very cursory study and probably didn't accurately reflect what the ultimate costs were going to be for municipal drinking water systems. So it was very disturbing. Our comments were not going to be relating specifically to the drinking water system because we don't have a groundwater-based system, we have a surface-based system. We will still have to sample for PFAS, but we have no indications at this point that we will have an issue. but rather that the next round of regulations that are going to come out are going to probably pertain to PFAS emitters. So wastewater treatment plants, what your discharge is, those will be some PFAS sampling requirements there. The leachate from our landfill, potentially sludge from our landfill, from our treatment plant, which, as you know, goes to our landfill. Those are coming down the road, it appears, fairly quickly. So we hope that as additional rules are brought forward by DES and considered, that this process will include some enhanced opportunity for public comment, because we're all going to be, most of us are going to be impacted by this one way or another. And we don't think that the financial ramifications have been well vetted. At this point, the science is all over the place. We don't know that this is a risk-based system, and we think it should be a risk-based system, particularly when we're dealing with effluent from things like landfills where there is not a public drinking water supply in the area. So they're moving very, very quickly on this. You know, I certainly fully understand the concern, particularly in the southern part of the state where there are contaminated wells. I saw that on last night's news that the system at Pease, which was paid for by the Air Force, just went into operation yesterday. They had the ribbon cutting. But a lot of communities won't be that lucky to have the U.S. government to build a plant for them, and they're going to be responsible for it themselves. The state has indicated they think there may be some funds available for loans, but I'll believe that when I see it. So it was not a great 5 hours spent, quite frankly. So.
What do you think drove the decision-making process to disallow any input?
I don't know. I have absolutely no idea.
It actually violates JLCAR's own administrative rules. They have a rule that requires them to take testimony if it's relevant to the proposed rule, and apparently there was no process to vet that. So personally, I think we should send a letter of concern, at least, to the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, because you've got a committee violating their own rules. That is the committee that approves rules.
Yeah,
well,
it's very concerning.
Ignoring however many hundred people showed up with concerns
right.
about this. I mean, they're supposed to be representatives, right?
Did they not even take testimony from members of the House? I mean,
Yeah, no, they did. So the JLCAR members were able to comment, which is how the representatives who were concerned about the fiscal impact on communities were able to speak.
But not members in the audience?
No one in the audience.
So
just the members sitting there and DES. That was it.
Wow.
So it was discouraging, to say the least.
And JLCAR staff had clearly collected the pink cards. I mean,
yes. Yeah, we filled them up. They were right up front.
The chair had them in front of him.
Who is the chair?
Representative Hatch?
Yeah, I think Representative Hatch was chairing that day.
That's really...
From Gorham?
From Gorham,
yes.
Yeah.
I believe that's who it was, yeah. So.
Is that, would that be the potential basis for some litigation?
Probably not.
Well, I remember when I was there, I was at the State House one day when, I forget who it was, but they ran out. It was when Bill O'Brien was the speaker, and he closed the gallery and would not allow the public in, and someone ran out and got an injunction against Bill O'Brien. So I mean,
that violates the Constitution.
Yeah, but would JLCAR not allowing? I don't know. I guess maybe it would be a question for the municipal association.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if that are they? I don't think they can do that.
What?
I mean, they cannot do that.
There's
but I think
nothing in the rules that describes the penalty for JLCAR themselves violating their own rules.
But I would think that due process would suggest that then that rule would not. If they have not followed the rules while adopting a rule, then that rule is not a valid rule.
Right, and in fact, one of the statutory basis for that committee objecting to a proposed rule is if the agency did not both have a public hearing and allow public comment and did not take into consideration the public comment. That's actually a basis for objecting to a proposed rule by JLCAR.
And that didn't happen either, because they submitted a certain set of rules. They had public hearings on those rules at 38 parts per trillion. And then after that, they came up with a whole new set of rules that never saw the light of day, any public input at all. So this process really throws democracy out the window in a big way.
I mean, I'm just suggesting that the municipal association might want to take up that charge.
We could do that, but at the end of the day, and we get it overturned, but they're gonna go right back to where they are. The reality is these rules are going to go in place, unfortunately.
Right,
So
but
all
I'm
we'd be
just
doing-
talking about principle,
I
the
understand.
principle of
And
the
due process.
matter.
Well, yes, because if they do it on this circumstance,
Right, they
they're
can do
gonna
it
do it
on
again. If we're just throwing democracy out the window, which is exactly what happened here, and on several levels,
Yeah.
it's not a good trend.
So what are we gonna do about it?
Well, the
Is
city can
municipal
certainly
so-
connect.
Yeah, I mean, Karen is right about this. You know, if they violated their own rules, you know, and what are we gonna do about it?
We have
I mean,
standing.
I don't think even if it ends up being as it is, I think it has to go on record in a meaningful way, that we stand up and say, this process, I mean, what's the point of having a process if you're not gonna honor the one that you have? You know, I've been before JLCAR, I understand the process of writing rules, public hearings in the field, bringing it to JLCAR, going through the whole process, and I've been stopped at JLCAR over one person standing up and saying, I don't like where "and" is. You know, and I respected that and did my business. So this is wrong. Either municipal association says something or the city does. That's just, you know, that's what I think has to happen.
Municipal association doesn't have standing. We're the ones that were actually impacted by that. We're the entity, because we have drinking water facilities, and we have, well, we're talking about drinking water in this particular case. So we have standing to do that.
And I did let our 4 reps know the next day, sent them all an email, did hear back from 1 or 2 of them. That
Do we
was it.
go to the speaker and the Senate president? I mean, what's the appropriate pathway?
But we could certainly follow our complaints, as Assistant Mayor Bilo had indicated, where they choose to take any action on that, and then the other action, of course, is a court injunction to force them to start the process all over again, do it the way they're supposed to do it.
Yeah, I think we should do that.
What does it cost?
Well, it can cost a lot. So.
Why would it cost a lot?
Are there
Because
other
you have to go to
communities who
court.
might want to join? If there were all
There
those
are.
people in the room, does somebody else want to jump on the bandwagon here?
They may very well. I mean, I was on vacation last week, so I haven't been updated on where they're at. But there was a coalition, because I've been on several conference calls about this. Whether other communities are interested in doing that, I don't know. But there's a cost to that. I mean, obviously, we'd have to file a minimus on it, and then NHMA would probably file a minimus on it as well.
Yeah, but if we prevailed, could we have our attorney's fees?
No. No.
Are you sure?
I mean,
I
I'd
am
be
sure.
willing to pay if we had a number of other communities and we could split the costs. If not, I think we just have to go the route of filing a complaint, whether it goes anywhere or not, we go on record.
Well, I think the important thing in sort of registering our concern that JLCAR violated its own rules is for the next round of the rules, which potentially impact like discharge from the wastewater treatment plant.
If you don't react, you're essentially letting a chair make his own rule with what he wants to do to get done at the time. And that isn't the way it's supposed to function.
And I fully understand, as does everyone else in the room, that this is a highly emotional issue, particularly for those individuals and those communities that have been impacted by outside entities, right? But to ignore the rest of us and to simply take action on the basis of, we've got to do something right now, when, particularly for this chemical, it's in my Gore-Tex jacket, it's in your nonstick pan, it's everywhere. It's not just from firefighting foam or a plastics company. It's everywhere.
Upholstery on carpet.
Upholstery, everywhere. I just think it was not a good application of science. And I don't think the science is very good at this point. I think this is reacting. So while everybody wants to protect public health, I think this is just a process. This is out of control. That's my opinion, yes.
So I think there's two things going on. I mean, I think one is the specific issue of PFAS and, you know, and that. But I guess I'm just really struggling with what I think is a completely separate matter, which is a body, a legislative body responsible for rulemaking, literally
Public
failing to
setting.
follow their own rules. And I just think that, like, that's a line in the sand they crossed. They need to be held accountable. I am not, like, the next implication might be for the specific issue of PFAS, but it might be for any other topic that could come before them, that they are disenfranchising the public. And that is, I just think that's fundamental to our democracy. And I would strongly support working with other communities to register that this is not acceptable.
So the municipal association was there, and so they've got a good idea, because they know everybody by sight, of the other communities that were potentially there. I know that the most vocal opponent was a representative from Tilton. I don't know the gentleman. So I assume that Tilton has some issues with this as well. But if we could direct the manager's office to reach out and see if there are other communities that might be interested, I think that would be the way to proceed in my mind.
So, two things. Draft a letter to the Senate President and the Chair, Speaker of the House, registering our concerns, right? So I'll get the draft letter, send it out to you guys to look at before I
Do we
send it.
CC the chair of JLCAR?
Chair and vice chair.
Chair and vice chair?
Vice chair is a
So
senator.
I'll draft that up, I'll send it all out to you, if there's any comments, get that back. And then two, look at the coalition, we already formed, see what their position is on that, see if I can get some interest and some cooperative effort to take some litigation action. And obviously try to get as much of that covered, maybe even written by NHMA, so that we're not paying some of that additional costs.
Yeah.
And they would be willing to potentially entertain that. Then I'll come back to you on that, if we take any action on that.
But I think I would not want it to be just a coalition of people who are upset about the PFAS standards. It's really, I think, a coalition of, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that the people who would have actual standing would be the people in that room, but I would hope that this kind of an action would be supported more broadly than just the people who happen to be in the room that day.
It's a really big issue, fundamental.
Okay, so, great. The reason I wasn't able to attend the governor's session on Friday was because I knew I'd be in college for at least 3 hours.